art is a core part of how we see, hear, understand the world. We've spent a good amount of time on this show talking about the intersection of art and the environmental issues that we live with every day. And in part, that's just because there's so much crossover. Art may not be the first way that we think about solving environmental challenges, but making sense of the environment, understanding it through tactile forms, being able to make, shape, and understand the world we live in are fundamentally questions of art. And over the last few months in Houston and the months to come, a wide variety of new art exhibits and pieces have opened that explicitly focus on art and the environment. And they think about questions ranging from the aesthetics of where we live to how to solve the biggest questions around environmental justice. So today, we're continuing that conversation and digging into how visual art in particular, although all the arts broadly, can help us to understand the changing world around us. I'm Weston Twardowski, the Associate Director of Rice's Center for Environmental Studies and the Associate Director of Eco Studio in Rice's Sustainability Institute, and you're listening to Gulf Streams on KPFT Houston 90.1 FM, Galveston 89.5 FM, and Huntsville 89.7 FM, where we talk with leading experts and community leaders to better understand the environmental problems and potential solutions facing our community. A quick reminder that you can catch up on Gulf Streams anytime through our podcast, available on all major podcast platforms. If you enjoy the show, please like and subscribe and make sure that you never miss an episode. So today I am joined by Alison Weaver, who is the founding executive director of the Moody Center for the Arts. She previously served as director of affiliates at the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum in New York and has grown the Moody into a nationally recognized art space with a strong focus on fostering emerging artists as well as a deeply rooted community art piece program. Alison, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
I am so delighted to get to talk with you today. And before we jump into the really explicit kind of conversation around the Moody's really outstanding work around environmental thinking and art making, I'd love to hear just a little bit about you and how you actually wound up taking over the Moody and getting to where you are and your path into the art world a little bit.
Well, I am a native Houstonian, so I grew up in Houston enjoying the amazing arts offerings here, but spent most of my career on the East Coast, working, as you mentioned, at the Guggenheim and other institutions. So a few years ago, in 2015, Rice University called and said they were interested in opening a new space dedicated to a kind of interdisciplinary art adventure. And needless to say, when Houston calls, one responds. So I moved here in 2015 and we opened the Moody in 2017, really with a mission to foster interdisciplinary conversation through the arts.
And so you mentioned that interdisciplinary conversation. What does that look like? It's a word we use a lot on this show. I think in environmental thought, it's a word that comes up a lot. But what does that mean in the context of an art space?
I think it means using the space as a platform to create potential intersections for different fields to collaborate. So those fields can be academic, performative, creative, or scientific. But we are fortunate to have a beautiful 50,000 square foot building with both gallery and theater space. We have classrooms. We host classes at Rice and visiting scholars. So the idea is to actually realize this interdisciplinary vision by bringing different experts together, both creative and research-based, with the hope that new ideas emerge and that we bring audiences along to perhaps see issues in new ways.
Well, and I will say we're very fortunate at Rice to have the Moody right there on campus and to get to collaborate and think alongside the Moody. And I'm sure it's very exciting for the artists who come through to get to work with Rice faculty and scholars and our exceptional students. But it's also very much a public art space. I mean, your audience is largely Houstonians, but I mean, the artists you bring in have international reputations, and so it is not merely a campus entity, but also this very, I think Houston, but also kind of globally serving entity in terms of the reach that you have and the kind of artists that you work with.
Absolutely. We think of it as a hinge, really, between the campus and the community. So everything we do is free and open to the public, and we invite all of Houston to come. But we also hope that we make some of the resources of Rice more readily available to the public by having a space that invites people in to both see art, visit performances, attend symposia. We do a variety of programs. We've been free from the beginning with the commitment to that being accessible to all. And to serve all of Houston. So we hope that the folks, even who haven't been to Rice before, will venture onto campus to find us and find a welcoming place.
Well, I want to pivot slightly to our topic of environment and art and this thinking. And, at least from my perspective, it feels like Houston's been having a banner year for kind of environmental art. We've talked to DiverseWorks a few weeks back about their exhibit River on Fire. We talked with folks from San Jacinto College who put on an exhibit called Solastalgia. There's been a lot of thinking, and it's been on my radar, certainly. I've been to many pieces of the Moody that think deeply about environmental questions and work, and so certainly the Moody's profile has been on my mind. But as I was digging through the archives, as I was mentioning a little bit ago, I was a little overwhelmed by just the sheer volume of kind of environmental thought the Moody's been really explicitly engaging with through a variety of kind of artistic medium as well for years now. And so I'd love to just do a kind of, quick hit of the best, in show, or maybe the ones that bubble up to the top of the memory as much as possible. But I know when we were just chatting before the show started, you were mentioning a piece back in 2019, kind of a dual piece between Natasha Bowden and Michelle Blasi, and these different pieces they were running that started some of this thought. Do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's, we are living on the Gulf Coast and obviously in a physical location that experiences the climate real time. Even today, there's a winter weather advisory. But we wanted to, at the Moody, very early on in our program, think about ways we might bring community to conversation around these topics, perhaps from a different perspective. And in particular, we thought, what if we were able to approach it from a more playful and humorous perspective instead of a more serious and maybe even sometimes shaming one? So we've all seen pictures of landfill, and yet we still sometimes use styrofoam cups. So we invited the Houston-based artist Natasha Bowden to create a site-specific installation called Sideways to the Sun, which filled one of our entire galleries. And we activated that installation with some pretty fabulous performances by both Machine Dazzle, who's a costume designer and performer from New York, and Ponchilli Creation, who are twin brothers from Puerto Rico who make puppets out of recycled materials. Oh, wow. And parallel to that, we invited the French artist based in Paris, Michelle Blasi, to create a work called We Were the Robots. And these two projects together were immersive installations that invited audiences in to maybe see our surroundings in an inviting and playful manner in order to open up that chance for discourse around a different future. And so that's the kind of approach we hope the Moody can bring something slightly different. I often say we're not a museum in the sense that we're not tracing a lineage of historical thought, but we're really looking for means of prompting discourse and conversation between the campus and the community. So we loved that program back in 2019, and we've done several other things since that involve art and the environment. We also oversee public art. So I'm thinking we have a series in our Brockstein Pavilion, which is a public cafe. And we invited the artist Sandra Perry to do a piece there, which was in 2021 called Ocean Modifier. And it was all about flooding in Houston that disproportionately affects often lower income communities. And so she made a beautiful piece. It was both a wallpaper and a series of lenticular photographs. And that was on view for a year. So we do have temporary programming. And most recently, permanent acquisition. So I can talk a little bit more about that, but I'll let you.
I want to follow up and just say I'm delighted that you opened with humor. Our last episode, actually, before the holidays, was climate change and comedy. And if you haven't listened to it, you can go back. But I think it's an important conversation. I'm glad, one, that we're following up on a little bit because of a variety of reasons we went into on that episode of the importance of humor, but also exactly as you're getting at it, it opens space for these kind of conversations. And it's something we've talked about a lot often with artists is the way that art allows for us to reimagine not only the problems that we're facing, but also what those solutions could be, should be, and in really thinking through that. And then I love also that you're mentioning this commitment to public engagement, public spaces, the way that we think through both research, which is such a core part of so many artists' practice, and expressing these ideas for diverse audiences, not even diverse audiences, for audiences you have no control over or don't know who they're going to be because they're entering a coffee shop, and how do you reach and communicate to these eclectic mixes that are just happening to you as a coffee shop. And so I find that really exciting. Okay, so I'll let you jump back in. So you, that takes us through like 2021, which is still many things to come.
Well, and I just wanted to mention we have a permanent acquisition for our public art program that we're very excited about, which just opened this fall by the Mexican-Canadian artist Rafael Lozano Hemmer. And it's called Climate Parliament. And it is a sound and light installation, which is comprised of 481 light speakers, each of which contains an individual voice recording about climate research and climate activism. And this is innovative for many reasons. First, because it's a work of sound and light, and that's innovative in a public art context. It's not a marble statue on a pedestal, but something that's very interactive and engaging, we hope, for audiences. But also because those 481 voices include both very well-known climate activists speaking at major international conferences, Rice history, like Margaret Mead spoke at Rice in the 1970s and her voice was recorded, but also contemporary scholars and students who are engaging with this topic, people you may have had on the show like Timothy Morton, and students who are very much thinking about their future on the planet. So together, these works create a piece that I think is critical, not just for our time, but for our future. And that's a very interesting way to approach public art, not a memorial to the past, but hopefully an opening for dialogue about today and tomorrow.
I wanted to get into Climate Parliament. I mean, I as you mentioned it's a very embodied piece. You know, I mean, it's certainly you're in this kind of tunnel behind a building. It's a fascinating space to be in. But as you walk around, I mean, at least in my experience with the piece, you know, there's a desire to kind of, okay, where's the sound coming from? Where do I follow along? How do I get to this voice? And it's also a piece that's kind of fascinating, especially once you understand it a little bit, to know, okay, I'm listening to these snippets of folks thinking about these issues and ideas. I mean, there's, I think, a couple of hundred separate recordings on it, and so it's not the kind of thing, you know, you can spend 5 minutes with and have exhausted. It's the kind of thing you can go back to over and over and over and still be discovering something new.
And I think it's interesting. It's activated by motion. So there are sensors that activate the sound as people walk through. So if there's a lot of activity, like an entire group of people walking through, many voices activate, and it sounds more like a murmuration, like you would hear a flock of birds or maybe waves on an ocean. But if you stand still under an individual speaker, you can really hear that person's sharing their ideas and research about climate. And it's quite powerful in the sense that it's so direct. I think that it, obviously you bring your own pathway to it, and it's kind of a choose your own adventure as you walk through, but it's also very timely, and it's a topic that unfortunately I wish were not going to be with us for as long as it will be, but it will be with us for a long time. So it was actually a major commitment on the part of the university to install a work around a specific topic, such as climate. And so I invite people to come find it. It takes a little bit of doing, but we have an app you can find on your iPhone a Rice Public Art app, and there's a map. So people can come onto campus and activate the app to find their way.
Can you talk a little about where the, and I mean, not so much the impetus, but maybe the impetus to bring Climate Parliament came from, and then that process? Because I know it was an involved process of research and a lot of teamwork to build that.
Yeah, I think the impetus was the building itself, which is the building dedicated to engineering and science. So there is so much research going on at all levels, both by senior, most tenured faculty to the most junior freshman student, all of whom are committed to and care about productive solutions to a better ecological future. So we really wanted to have an artwork that would respond to the research of the building. And we were delighted to get to know Rafael Lozano-Hemmer, who has done works about many things, but is himself a trained scientist. So he comes at these topics more almost begins with his training as a scholar scientist and then engages his skills as a media and light artist. And so it was a wonderful collaboration with Raphael and his studio, but also with faculty and students at Rice. So we had students helping gathering recordings, we had faculty, we had community members such as the Sugarland 95 who were involved with their voice recordings. So it was really I think a model of ways in which the arts can bring people together around important issues.
So I want to get to the exciting exhibit that's opening in just a little bit, but I want to hold back for one more moment just because I think you mentioned the role of interdisciplinary work. And I think a really fine example of that is actually the exhibit that just closed with Doho Sa, who's a phenomenal artist that you brought in to do a kind of in-process series with. But there was a really fascinating collaboration that happened explicitly between him and an engineering team. Am I right? Or
Yes.
You want to walk us through that a little bit?
This project was such a wonderful long-term collaboration with the artist Doho Sa. He's based in London, and he is himself a very collaborative spirit. He works often with experts from other fields. So when speaking to him about doing something at Rice and in Houston, he said he would really love to work on his bridge project. And the concept behind it is building a bridge between his homes, which over time have been in Seoul, South Korea, his home, then his home in New York, now his home in London. And he said, I'd really like to build an actual bridge that could be built in the Arctic and not negatively impact the environment there. Could I work with Rice engineers to do so? And so we partnered him with it was a senior capstone engineering team of students, and the professor Khalil Arazo oversaw it. And he collaborated with them for a whole academic year to design actual bridges. So it's kind of taking the artistic concept from the imaginary to the real, to the practical, and engaging the intellectual resources that the university has to do so. So it was a really interesting year-long conversation, which manifested in both part of the exhibition where we had some of the designs on view, and also a video that premiered both in Houston and in Seoul, South Korea. And my favorite bridge design was based on the principles of origami. So the students discovered that origami was invented in Korea, and they designed a bridge that used those structural principles in its design.
That's fascinating. And what I love about this example is, one of the things that we point to is the importance of remembering, which indicates, where we often place the role of aesthetics, but remembering aesthetics in our design processes. And I love that this is really starting from the aesthetic and moving to the practical, and the way that shifts that process, especially somewhere like Houston, where we have a lot of infrastructure and it's highly visible. It's something to really, I think, we need to stick with, that these thorny environmental questions often, and whether that's everything from landscape design, which is naturally something we want to be beautiful, but over to our highways, our bridges, our even kind of physical infrastructure around plants, and I mean plants not in the sense of this word, it's too many meanings in English, kind of industrial plants, right, and as opposed to greenery plants. I think there's something that we lose when we always just relegate that to a space voided of aesthetic. And I think this project is really fascinating, and especially taking young engineers and really suggesting what happens when we open with that. What happens when that is the prompt and the call in the beginning? And then we work backwards to try to maintain that, because it's one of the things that we lose. And it's something that we struggle with in environmental conversations, is if it's not aesthetically pleasing, it's going to meet resistance.
And I think it's inspiring to see the outcome. It takes a bit of an act of faith when you bring collaborative partners together. There isn't a predetermined solution. So each participant has to really be open to the possibilities. But I think everyone involved, certainly in that project, would agree that the final outcome was greater than any one individual could have begun with. And so that sort of spirit of great minds coming together and collaborating across fields and respecting the training and expertise of the other in order to come to a new solution, I think is what we need more of in general in order to move forward on some of these large problems.
I think you're absolutely right, especially on that trickiness that, we fall into those kind of disciplinary silos, which we hear a lot about. But I was laughing just yesterday, actually, with my cousin about he's an engineer working with architects and the kind of divides that wind up happening between people who collaborate quite frequently, but collaborative work is demanding, and it's actually something that I think artist spaces often lead really well in and make a lot of sense of. It's kind of built into a lot of our practices, and so I think it's a space that inviting artists in, even if it's just that kind of space of learning, how do we collaborate? What does that actually mean, as opposed to here's a plan, we're going to ship it off to you, and you kind of sign off on it, is a really valuable thing to be teaching young people.
Well, and that's exactly what we hope is in the DNA of the Moody, and we're fortunate to have a good space to do it.
So I want to jump into the upcoming show that you have, which is really focusing all about environmental ideas and questions and problems in particular, and it's Breathe, I believe. Would you like to walk us through a little bit?
Absolutely. We're incredibly excited about this project opening later this month. It's called Breathe Toward Climate and Social Justice. And it is an exhibition. We're featuring 14 artists, all of whom are engaged with topics of climate and social justice. So really looking at the intersection of the impact that changes in our ecological world have on various communities, and hopefully, again, opening up opportunity for conversation about those changes and how we might imagine a more equitable future.
And so this is a co-production with the Hammer Museum in LA, right?
Yes, this project originated at the Hammer as part of their Pacific Standard Time Art and Science Collide initiative. And if you don't know that, it's a California-based initiative that happens every few years, funded by the Getty Foundation. And this last year, the theme was art and science. And so we reached out to the Hammer, and we have worked with several of the artists in the exhibition before, a couple of Houston-based artists as well.
Great.
And we said, what if we do this together? It's actually more environmentally friendly to travel an exhibition that's already been collected in one location than to disperse it and bring together new work, if you're just thinking about your environmental footprint. So it makes a lot of sense both logistically and environmentally to partner. And so we were able to take most of the show, not all of the work. They have a larger footprint at the Hammer Museum than we have here, but we were able to bring some really, really exciting work, several of which were newly made and commissioned for this show. And they'll be in Houston starting January 24.
So I'd love to hear a little bit, that subtitle, Climate Justice, Social Justice. Do you want to weigh in a little bit? We talk a lot about climate justice, but what is, especially, and I think many of the artists that we featured on the show before have made that explicit, but how is that thinking forming? How is that playing out throughout this exhibit? And why is now maybe a good moment for an exhibit of that nature?
Well, and I'll start with the beginning of the title, Breathe. This exhibit really emerged from 2020 and from both the COVID crisis as a respiratory disease and also the murder of George Floyd. So the act of breathing could be perceived as both a form of survival, but also a form of resistance and sort of a more socially engaged practice. So it began then, and the project, has really brought, I think artists are like the rest of us, living in the world and really responding to what's going on in the contemporary moment. And so the artists in this project have long been engaged with varieties of perspectives based on their own background. And I'll just give one example. A photographer named LaToya Ruby Frazier, who is originally from Braddock, Pennsylvania, did a wonderful series of photographs in Flint, Michigan over the Flint water crisis, which many people may remember was when it's really a human-made crisis in that the water source in Flint began to come from the Flint River, even though the pollution levels were well known there. And obviously, a political choice like that has a major impact on communities living there in terms of clean and healthy water and their access to something that's so vital to their existence. So LaToya Ruby Frazier, the photographer in the tradition of kind of documentary photography, captured the impact of this on communities in Flint, and we are showing a section of that work as a means of both reminding ourselves that sometimes these issues are under our own power. They are human involved decisions. So we want to be thoughtful about how we think about resource allocation and availability to clean water and air.
On something that immediately jumps to mind for me when you mentioned LA and Houston, right, as the two cities kind of continually jockey for worst air quality in the country, which when we think about breathing, I mean, is certainly, I totally understand that impetus of COVID and George Floyd. And also, I think something really directly personal for these two cities is the quality of air we breathe has a lot of problems in both LA and Houston, and is a major issue for many of us who are living with all kinds of myriad health impacts from that. And so that kind of environmental health concern, I think, is really clear. And so clearly the exhibit is thinking through climate justice broadly and not just air. But I do love that focus for two cities where that's such a pressing of mind issue. You want to walk us through some of the other exciting art that we might encounter in this exhibit?
Absolutely. We were very excited about it. When you walk in, you'll be greeted by the work of an artist named Garnett Pewitt, and he is a fourth-generation beekeeper. And I know here in Houston we have very active beekeeping associations, and Garnett really partners with the bees to create what he calls appy sculptures. So he creates a man-made frame, and then a queen bee is placed in the frame, and then the hive builds the sculpture out of honeycomb.
Oh, wow.
And so it's really an example of how he's kind of modeling ways in which we can think collaboratively about how to work together with our natural colleagues and peers in the natural world. And we'll be having at the same time a performance by two Rice professors, Joe Campana and Kurt Stallman, a literary scholar and a composer, who have written a multimedia performance piece about bees and pollination called A Chapel in the Hive. So it's a way to, think about, obviously bee populations have also been threatened by the way we've our environmental choices, and so sometimes they don't have the habitat that they need, and pollination is critical to our ecosystems around the world. So it's both a fascinating form of art, but also a wedge into conversation about pollination and ecosystems and preservation of habitat.
Well, and I think that's fascinating too, that it's, the impetus of this more than human collaboration to the sculpture, but then, as you mentioned, Joe and Kurt's music and a poet, collaborating and thinking together in these, again, multidisciplinary forms to think through both the history of bees, but also their presence. And I mean, yes, exactly. Part of a fascinating conversation around honeybees and native bees and the various myriad issues with this kind of charismatic, usually we say charismatic megafauna, but here we're talking microfauna. We're talking very small, but big impact on people really like bees, myself included.
Well, and I think what you said earlier, too, is really important, that we're thinking a lot about how these issues affect the Gulf Coast. Mm-hmm. So obviously coming from the Pacific Coast and LA, but then coming to Houston on the Gulf Coast. And one artist who we're also excited to feature is Brandon Ballingy, known to you. I know.
Brandon and I, yes, we go back.
But he's based in Louisiana and is both a biologist and a climate activist. And his work is a series called Ghosts of the Gulf. And he takes specimens from natural science museums in Louisiana and then paints them out of crude from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. So he's extracting from the man-made climate disasters in the Gulf Coast to draw our attention to species loss and the ecological impact of some of those environmental disasters. And we'll both be featuring his works, which are quite stunning just on their own. We do start with the art, and we care deeply about the visual power of these objects. But then we will activate that. Brandon will be coming and hosting a workshop in March, so people will be able to learn more about his work, but also make their own artworks out of crude oil.
I will say I've attended Brandon's workshops. I know he runs a variety of them, so I can't speak to all, but I've attended one that was really actually geared more towards kind of K through 8 students. That was wonderful. That was just a delightful afternoon of drawing and thinking about fish and learning about fish and our local ecological problems. He's also been doing a fascinating project for several years now, completely rehabilitating this kind of tract of land that he and his wife purchased and trying to very deliberately make it suit local ecologies in Louisiana. And they are always welcome to visitors and volunteers. So folks who would enjoy a little day trip to Louisiana to go out and see some local ecology, I suggest you look up Brandon Ballingy and his work there.
And he also just had a work on view at Diverse Works as part of their River on Fire show. And so we really love to partner with our colleagues in the sense that a visitor might have been at Diverse Works to see that exhibition or attend they had a wonderful symposium on climate, and then come to the Moody and see a different body of work and meet the artist. So we often think of these projects in a more durational way with the hope that they create opportunity for more lasting engagement together with our peers and across the city.
No, I mean, that's really exciting. I also know one of those pieces, I believe the one at Diverse Works is going to be going to the Galveston Arts Center later this year. And so some wonderful, the kind of the ecosystem of environmental art around the Gulf Coast. Who else do you want to share with us is coming?
Well, one project we're extremely excited about is this. We're commissioning specific for the Moody, so it will only be here in Houston. And it's by the Chinese artist Xin Liu. And she is interested in enzymes that have shown promising properties of breaking down plastics in water. So obviously we have a big problem with our plastic bottles in our oceans and other bodies of water. And there are enzymes called PETase enzymes that are shown to be able to break down some of these plastics. So she is creating an artwork to make that visible. She is going to 3D print a skyline of Houston out of these recycled plastic and then place it in a tank she's coming to Rice and using a chemistry lab. And apparently to make an enzyme, you inject DNA with bacteria.
Sure.
I mean, this is what I'm told.
Not my neck of the woods either.
No one will ask me to do so, but I have learned. And so she will create these enzymes in a chemistry lab, place the artwork in a sort of tank in the exhibition space, and then over the course of the exhibition, we will all watch while the enzymes break down the plastics. So it's both experimental, it's provocative, it's, I hope, solution-based in the sense that we're not just looking at, bad behaviors that we might change, but we're thinking about solutions to the situation that we're in today. And I think the idea that some of those solutions can come from the arts as well as the sciences, or ideally the intersection of the two. And working with an artist like Xin Liu is really exciting because she speaks both languages.
No, I mean, that is exciting. And I think it's something that's really fundamental to this work as well. Is something that we've talked about before on the show, but something that sticks with us is that nature of this is hard work. These are hard topics. I think when people often, hear about any kind of environmental issue, there can be a natural desire to kind of shut down, to not want to engage. When we think about climate change, it feels overwhelming. And something that I really admire in a lot of both the advocates who I know who are working on these issues day in and day out is both their own personal art practices, which feels very much like a personal kind of way of healing and engaging. I have friends who write climate change songs, who take lots of pictures and really beautiful photography of nature, different ways of really trying to think through how do I stay healthy and maintain my love for this work, but also deal with the reality that it is difficult subject matter. And so I think coming back to that approach to humor, to joy, to imagining alternative realities that can help us move forward into possibility rather than merely sticking with what we're losing or what's changing. I think that's really critical work that artists lead in. So I'm delighted to hear you talking about that.
Yeah, and I think we think about these issues, we try to think about them from so many different perspectives. So whether it's, Shinlu is taking a very scientific and chemical perspective, but we will also be featuring the Houston-born artist Mel Chen, who is kind of a hometown favorite and hero, or at least of mine, and I know of others. Yes. And Mel has done, he created a new body of work specifically for the Breathe exhibition, which is based on a more, shall I say, spiritual perspective. So he interviewed people who had gone through a traumatic event, and he spoke to them about before the event and then after. And he created a diptych for each person he spoke to, and that's 2 paintings. So one painting depicting a traumatic event like a car crash, and the second painting depicting the more spiritual aspect or more kind of intangible aspect of their response to that and how they kind of thought about the world differently as a result of going through that trauma. And when asked, why is he doing this? First of all, he's not really a painter. He's a conceptual artist. He hadn't painted in 40 years. He taught himself to paint again to do this work. But what he talks about is, in order to move forward with these difficult and challenging and sometimes intimidating problems, we have to open up our spirit of empathy. And so he feels that by presenting these stories and shared human experience, that we can together be more radically empathetic and then move forward. So it's an interesting and less maybe tangible than creating enzymes that break down plastics, but equally important. And so we feel to have both types of perspectives or multiple perspectives in this project, in this show, is really indicative of the ways we hopefully will come at these very overwhelming problems from diverse angles.
No, it reminds me, actually, interestingly enough, of the work of Jim Blackburn, who's a local environmental lawyer, a professor at Rice, is deeply rooted in engagement around protecting our coast and has done exceptional work for decades. And Jim actually wrote a book called Earth Church, which is poems and prayers for the earth, and that spiritual component, really thinking deeply about the role of spirituality. And I think from a very earnest perspective of his own, that's meaningful to him. And so I think that resonates with people very broadly from all walks of this work.
And I think it's part of the work we all need to do, maybe to release some of the siloed thinking that we traditionally, that's pretty automatic for most of us, to think, okay, anything spiritual is on one side of the aisle and anything scientific is on the other, when in fact sometimes these points of intersection are informative to each other and maybe critical as starting points for new thought.
Absolutely. And that segues perfectly. We're rapidly running out of time, but I do want to draw our attention to both when, if folks want to go see Breathe, they can do so.
Well, it opens January 24, 6 p.m. It's free. Please come. Everyone's welcome. It's just a big public opening and celebration. And several of the artists will be there that night. So Mel Chen will be there. Another Houston artist, Tiffany Chung, who's featured in the exhibition, will be present. Shinlu will be there if you want to ask her about enzymatic reactions.
Very exciting.
And Chanupa Hanska Luger, who I haven't mentioned, but he is an indigenous artist based in New Mexico. And he will have a major installation in our central gallery, which I invite you to come see. And he'll be there as well. So we'll have several artists you can meet and speak to, as well as just enjoy the art and have some refreshments. And it'll be on view until May 10. So we have quite a few months this spring to come, and you're welcome. Please check out our website for those dates and additional events.
Excellent. Yeah, and those additional events, there's many. They're very exciting.
But I would be remiss if I didn't mention a couple of the performative events. So one is a partnership with Kinetic Ensemble, and they're performing Environmental Strings on March 29, so for music fans.
Great.
We'll have the Bee performance I mentioned on April 5th. And then we'll have Spill on April 11th and 12th. And I feel like Maybe you should say a few words about that.
Sure. So Spill is a theatrical piece by the really outstanding, nationally recognized playwright Leigh Fondakowski, who is a co-author, lead author on a show called Laramie Project, which folks may have heard of. And it has hundreds of hours of ethnographic interviews done after the BP oil spill and brings that together into a really dynamic piece of theater. It'll have several really wonderful actors from our Houston community. I am lightly involved in it, which is why I know things. So I should broadcast that, but it's a free event, and I would encourage folks to make it out. It should be an exciting performance.
And if people are excited, even before the show's open, this Friday we have a dance performance. Ooh. So while we're installing, so this is a very behind-the-scenes, real-time performance, but we have invited a choreographer named Hope Moore, and she is collaborating with the visual artist Renu Mukherjee. And they are in the galleries right now creating a interstitial work about energy in the land. So we'll have 4 dancers, one from Houston and the others are from San Francisco, and they will be responding to the visual scores created by Renu and Hope. Actually, both have created visual work and projections. And then the dancers will be moving in the space, responding to how we carry with us what's in the earth, whether it's lithium or fossil fuels or other kinds of spiritual energy. It should be really exciting. It's at 6 p.m. Friday night. It's also free. It's about an hour, so feel free to stop by.
Very exciting. Well, it has been an absolute delight getting to chat with you and learn about all these exciting projects, and especially Breathe as it comes up. And I, again, encourage folks to go out, enjoy it. It sounds like there's a great opening ceremony being planned. Thank you so much for your time, Alison Weaver.
Thanks so much for having me.
We'll go now over to a short piece from one of our student researchers all about community-engaged science.
Hi, everyone. This is Sophia. Today, we'll be chatting with Juan Flores, manager of the Community Air Monitoring Program at Air Alliance Houston. Welcome to the show, Juan. It's good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for coming on. And I'm so excited to learn more about the Community Air Monitoring Program. So to start off, could you tell me a bit about your past work experience and how you came to work at Air Alliance Houston?
I've been with Air Alliance going on 10 years. I live in Galena Park, which is right on the port, and I've seen pollution all my life, so it was a natural fit for me to work with Air Alliance. And the Community Air Monitoring Program, we've been active with it going on over 3 years now. We are trying to spread air monitors around these communities, these fence line communities and overall communities, to try to see exactly the pollution that's in the area and give people an opportunity to know what's going on inside their neighborhoods, so they can make decisions on, hey, is today a good day to go jogging? Is today a good day to let my kid go play outside, depending on the pollution? And that's the beauty of our air monitoring program, is we have it in the communities. We have them at people's homes. We have them at churches. We have them at near schools. So these monitors are spread out in the community. So, usually these big monitors that they have with TCEQ and all that, but they're usually like, a mile, 2 miles away from the neighborhoods. But our network is in the community, which really makes it very, very convenient.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing about the important work that the program is doing. And honestly, it is relieving to hear that work is being done in Houston. So on that note, can you tell me a bit more about what it's like to work directly with communities to monitor air quality and improve public health?
I really enjoy working in the communities. Every community is unique. Every community has its own, I had to say its own personality. We have this program, in communities such as Cashmere Gardens near the Fifth Ward area. We have them out in Cloverleaf. We have them in Baytown. So it's spread out around the area, and it's like so cool to be able to go meet people on a daily basis and get to know their stories and get to know the neighborhoods for what they are, and then try to help them out as best that we can.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's definitely crucial work, and I'm glad to hear that it seems like these experiences have really resonated with you and many others. Because these experiences are so important, I was wondering, what are some of the most surprising or alarming things that you've learned from the data collected by this program? Have there been any moments in the data where it made you go, wow, we really need to act on this?
Definitely. I'll start where I live. I live in Galena Park, and we have a network here in Galena Park. And I can tell you, living in Galena Park since I was 4 years old, and now I'm 47. So I've been in Galena Park for 43 years, and I've smelled these chemicals since I was a kid all the way till now. And it was kind of eye-opening when we had a community meeting earlier this year, and giving the data. It's like I was presenting, I was reading the data, like, oh my God, look how bad it is. I mean, look how high the VOC levels are. Look how high the PM is constantly. We've always knew it was there, and we've always done it, but it's actually eye-opening whenever you see the data and you see how bad it really has been, and how bad it is now. It's such a, you know, for me to have to explain to the community, like, hey guys, this is what it is. And that's the thing about the data that comes out is not the easiest thing to explain to the common average citizen. Like, hey, this is a VOC. Okay, what's a VOC? Well, it's benzene. It's butadiene, hydrogen cyanide. These are these are not the easiest things to explain to people, and that's been our challenge, is to try to get it down to a level that they can understand it, so they can know how bad it is, and how it affects them.
As you were mentioning your own personal experience, I'm sure you have a lot to say about this, but how does the program incorporate community feedback? And specifically, which communities are you operating in right now?
Whenever we start the air monitoring program in these communities, we always have a community mapping session in which we invite community members to come out. We have a meeting, we put a map out, and like, okay, guys, this is your community, you live here. Where do you think the pollution is at? Where do you think it's coming from? And so the community gets a chance to identify the areas. Sometimes we use stickers. If it's something that we know is really bad, they put a red sticker because it's bad. If they suspect something's in the area, it's yellow, a yellow sticker. If it's green, well, maybe in this area. So we let the community get involved very much so, to give us their feedback on where the suspect is at. And so we get that data, that information from them. We research it a little further, and then we do our best to try to put these monitors in the areas that the community really wants them at, to try to make a difference.
Well, it's great to hear how high of a priority you put community input at. And I'm wondering, related to that, how has the community responded to the program so far?
It's been good. You know, these monitors, they range from a small purple air monitor to having a little bigger monitor, which is called a Sunset ramp. They're bigger monitors that we put up. So, a purple air costs about 250, and then the ramps cost about $5,000-$6,000. So they range in prices. So, we only have so many of them, so we try to get them out there where it's needed. But up to this point, the community has been very responsive, and they want to know this data. We're actually in the process of building the dashboard that we're hoping to let out here in the next month or two, to let people know. And we're going to create some commercials, some social media commercials, to explain to people, like, look, guys, you have this tool, you have this network, it's in your community. This is how you can use it.
You had previously mentioned that a big issue for air quality data is that it's not super accessible, and you just kind of touched on this. But specifically, how do you ensure transparency in the data collection and reporting process in the program?
Well, the good thing about our network, it's public, always public. Anybody can go on there. Any citizen can go on there and check out the air quality. They can dig into it and get more details. So the actual data is always public. Anybody can see it. Anybody can access it. I've had people I was in a conference in Pittsburgh, like, Juan, we love your monitors. We use your data. I'm like, really? I didn't know y'all were using it, but they are. But there's people using them, throughout the country, the data. But more importantly, for the problem that we've always had, like me living in Galena Park, is always like, we've always smelled these chemicals. And by the time you call TCEQ or Harris County to come out and investigate it, it could be like several hours later. It could be the next day. By the time they get here, it's gone. There's no more smell. And it's my word against their word. And then now we're flipping it, because now, for the first time, citizens have their own data. So now we have our scientific data to stand back. It's no longer my word. It's my word and the data, going up against, TCQ, or going up against these companies that are bad actors. It's kind of flipping the script a little bit, which is really, really cool.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Juan. Looking to the future, what's next for this program? Are there plans to expand or introduce new technologies to improve community air monitoring?
We're always looking for new technology. We got some different type of monitors out there. I mean, for these monitors, like for example, a purple air, all it does is measure particulate matter. That's all it does. So, whatever's in the air, dust, anything like that, this thing will pick it up. Now, the other thing is like, there's other chemicals out there that cannot be read that way because it's a different thing. VOCs, benzene, and butadiene, those require another type of monitor. So we're always trying to expand and bring new technology into the community and trying to do that. I'm hoping, one of my biggest goals is to, here in the near future, they have these canisters. It's like a vacuum. And like you go and there's a knob and you hit the knob, this vacuum will suck whatever is there. And so whenever it does smell, people can get this canister, go outside, just, push the handle and suck that sample in there. And then we'll get that sample, take it to a lab and get it analyzed. So we're trying to get it to another level to where it's like, okay, guys, you've always wondered what it was. Let's see what it really was. And hopefully in the future, we'll be able to see like, look, that chemical that we smelled that day was, for example, butadiene. And we'll know, okay, the winds were blowing from the southeast today. Let's see what's in the southeast. We'll be like, oh, look, that refinery's over there in that direction. The winds were blowing that way. It was this chemical they produced. We're hoping to get to the point that we'll be able to like really pinpoint it a little bit more and no longer have that thing. I mean, I am having problems, but I mean, believe it or not, I'm trying to find a lab in the area that will work with us. And up to this point, nobody wants to work with us. All these laboratories are being used by big businesses, big refineries, and they consider it a conflict to work with us. And it's weird because it's making me have to go outside of Houston to find these labs. I'm going to get it, and we're working on it. But eventually, we're hoping to get to that point, to the next level, to try to pinpoint these companies a little better.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you'll get it very soon, and I'm excited to see how those will be implemented in the future. To end our talk on another uplifting note, do you have any favorite success stories or examples of how the program has made a tangible difference for the communities involved so far?
We're working on it, but every year, once the 1 year period is up, we have these community meetings, and we'll go, report back to the community. This is what we found. These are the trends, And so we share that and we create something called a community action plan. It's like, yeah, big deal. My air is bad, but what are we going to do about it? That's what people tell me. I'm like, yeah, let's do something about it. So we try to create these action plans with the community input to see, for example, there's this metal recycler that just smells and is polluting. Let's figure out a way to go and improve that. Sometimes we'll set up a meeting with the company and say, look, guys, this is our data. Look how bad it is. Can we work together to try to resolve this? That's one way of doing it. There's been other times that residents have complained about how bad it really smelled. And so we're able to provide them that data, in which they in return use that data to submit it to TCEQ, Harris County as proof. Because like I said, before that proof was never around, but now we got that opportunity.
Juan, thank you so much for sharing and for taking the time to talk to me today.
No problem. Anything you guys need, just let us know.
To everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. We hope that this conversation has sparked more awareness about the importance of air quality and community involvement, as well as the essential work being done by Juan and the rest of the team at Air Alliance Houston. Be sure to tune in again soon for more discussions on critical environmental issues affecting Houston and beyond. Until next time.
For how to get involved this week, Artists Vote is a Galveston conservation organization that marries art, education, and conservation. Artists Vote takes students and learners out into Galveston Bay and around Galveston to learn about local ecology and understand the environmental threats facing our region. Once a month, they host open work days to help restore wild areas on Galveston Island. They remove invasive species, treat fire ants, pick up trash, and they plant native plants. They help steward the Gulf Coast, the Coastal Heritage Preserve, which is over 1,000 acres of land and water around Galveston Island. Their first volunteer day of the year will be this Saturday from 9 to 11 a.m. You can learn more on their website about how to volunteer or join them at the Artists Boat Coast Heritage Preserve. It is a great organization and a great way to kick off 2025. If you have questions or ideas for what you'd like featured on Gulf Streams, leave a voicemail at 713-348-4081 or email us at westonT@rice.edu. A quick reminder that you can catch up on Gulf Streams anytime through our podcast, available on all major podcast platforms. If you enjoy the show, please like and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. Gulf Streams is a co-production of KPFT Houston and Rice's Center for Environmental Studies, with support from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and the Rice Sustainability Institute's Eco Studio. Produced by Weston Twardowski, co-produced by Joseph Campana. Audio engineer Rico Enriquez. Originals music by Carter Dean. Research support provided by Jaden Bray-Boyce, Sophia Soltez, and Numan Rinstor. Stay tuned for the R&R Show with Ronnie Renfro and Tom Richards here on KPFT Houston 90.1 FM, Galveston 89.5 FM, and Huntsville 89.7 FM.